Stealth camping is all about adventure and pushing the boundaries. It's the thrill of setting up camp where you're not supposed to, blending into your surroundings, and living on the edge. But what happens when the wilderness doesn't want you there? When you set up your tent in the wrong place at the wrong time? Tonight, I'm going to share a story about a stealth camping trip that went horribly wrong. It's a story that will make you think twice about where you decide to pitch your tent next time. It was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway. I've always been an outdoor enthusiast, and stealth camping had become my newest obsession. The idea of camping in places where no one was supposed to go appealed to me, the ultimate escape from civilization. I had picked a secluded spot deep in the national forest, far from any trails or campsites. I wanted complete isolation. I left early in the morning, hiking deep into the woods with my backpack full of gear. I followed no path, relying only on my compass and map, weaving through dense trees and thick underbrush. By late afternoon, I found the perfect spot, a small clearing surrounded by tall pines. It was far off any beaten path, a place where no one would ever think to look. I set up my tent, built a small fire pit, and settled in for the night, excited about my little adventure. As the sun set, the forest around me grew darker and quieter. The only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. I made myself a quick dinner and sat by the fire, feeling the thrill of being completely alone in the wilderness. But as the night wore on, the excitement began to fade, replaced by an odd feeling of unease. It was as if the forest itself was watching me. Around midnight, I decided to call it a night. I doused the fire, crawled into my tent, and zipped up the flap. The inside of the tent was pitch black, but the thick fabric gave me a sense of safety. I lay there, listening to the sounds of the forest, trying to drift off to sleep. That's when I heard it, the faint sound of footsteps outside my tent. At first, I thought it might be an animal, maybe a deer or a raccoon. But the footsteps were slow and deliberate, moving in a circle around my campsite. My heart started to race. I held my breath, straining to hear any other sounds. Then the footsteps stopped, right outside the tent. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I didn't dare move or make a sound. I reached for my flashlight, my hand shaking, and switched it on. The light pierced the darkness, but I saw nothing through the thin fabric of the tent. I slowly unzipped the flap, just enough to peek outside. My flashlight beam swept across the clearing, but there was no one there. No sign of any animal or person. Just the empty forest, silent and still. I sat there for a while, flashlight in hand, waiting for something to happen, but the footsteps didn't return. Eventually, I convinced myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, maybe a branch falling or some animal I didn't see. I zipped the tent back up and laid down, though sleep didn't come easy. I must have dozed off at some point because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to the sound of something scraping against the side of my tent. The noise was slow and steady, like fingernails dragging across fabric. My eyes flew open and I grabbed my flashlight again, my heart pounding in my chest. I called out, "Who's there?" But there was no answer, just that slow, deliberate scraping sound. I shined my light on the side of the tent where the sound was coming from, but all I could see was the shadow of something moving just outside. It wasn't big, maybe the size of a person, but it was moving strangely, almost like it was crouched down low. I decided I needed to know what it was. I grabbed my camping knife and slowly unzipped the tent, bracing myself for whatever was out there. I swung the flashlight around, but once again, there was nothing. The scraping had stopped, and the clearing was empty, just as before. I stepped outside, my knife at the ready, shining the light in every direction, but there was no one. That's when I noticed something strange. All around my campsite, in a perfect circle, the ground was disturbed, like someone had dragged something heavy through the dirt. The circle was about 20 feet in diameter, completely surrounding my tent. I felt a chill run down my spine. It was too perfect to be natural. I decided I couldn't stay there any longer. Whatever was out there, it didn't want me here, and I wasn't about to find out why. I packed up my gear as quickly as I could, constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting to see something emerge from the trees. As I was packing, I heard a faint whisper, so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around, but there was no one. just the empty forest and the shadows cast by my flashlight. My heart was racing now, and I was in a full panic. I threw the last of my things into my pack and started back the way I came, not caring about the noise I made. I just needed to get out. As I hiked, I kept hearing things. Branches snapping behind me, rustling in the bushes, even that faint whisper again, growing louder. You shouldn't be here. You need to leave. I picked up the pace, practically running through the forest, branches whipping at my face. Then, just as I thought I was getting away, I tripped on something and went sprawling to the ground. My flashlight flew out of my hand, skittering into the darkness. I scrambled to my feet, my palms scraped and bleeding, and grabbed the light. I shined it back down the trail to see what I had tripped over. There, lying across the path, was a crude rope, covered in dirt and leaves, almost invisible. I shined the light further down, and my blood ran cold. The rope led into the forest, where I saw them, figures standing just beyond the reach of my flashlight, still and silent, watching me. They were wrapped in ragged clothing, their faces obscured by shadows, but I could feel their eyes on me, cold and unwelcoming. I turned and ran as fast as I could, not stopping until I burst out of the woods and into the safety of my car. I jumped in, locked the doors, and drove away, my heart racing, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I didn't look back. To this day, I don't know who or what I encountered that night. I've heard stories about those woods, tales of people disappearing and strange happenings, but I never believed them until now. One thing's for sure, I won't be going back there. And if you ever think about stealth camping, just remember, some places are meant to be left alone. The wilderness has secrets, and sometimes it's best not to find them.